The heavy, hollow silence that followed my monthly bank transfers for my son and daughter-in-law's extravagant vacations was a constant reminder of my unacknowledged sacrifices, my life drained by their assumed expectation. I was present in body, but erased in spirit, filled with a suffocating sense of helplessness. Yet, in my deepest moments of quiet despair, I found a flicker of my true worth, hidden within the stories they never cared to hear, a power about to ignite. Before we jump back in, don't forget to subscribe while you're listening, and let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from. Now, take a breath and listen closely. This is my story. My pension arrived like clockwork, a small, reliable sum. But lately, it felt less like income and more like a transfer service. Each month, those precious numbers appeared in my bank account, only to vanish almost immediately into Daniel and Chloe's ever-growing pile of vacation debts. They never asked directly. It was always a vague, soft-spoken request. "Mum, things are a bit tight after Costa Rica. Could you help us out?" Or a nonchalant, "Chloe found these amazing tickets for Italy, but we're a little short after the last one." A quiet, assumed expectation, delivered with a casual air that barely concealed the underlying desperation, or perhaps the sheer entitlement. There was never a "thank you," not a single handwritten card. I remembered sitting at my kitchen table, the low hum of the old refrigerator the only sound, staring at the shrinking numbers on my tablet screen. The digits dwindled, and with them, my life seemed to shrink too. This small, tidy apartment, once a haven of peace, had become a cage of my own making. Every bill I paid for them, every luxury they flaunted on social media, felt like a brick added to the walls around me. It wasn't just money they were taking. It was my future, my very breath, my quiet moments of dignity. One Tuesday morning, the bank sent a notification. Another impending direct debit, a substantial deposit for an adventure safari Daniel and Chloe had booked, a month-long excursion to Africa. My eyes traced the digits. It was more than half of what I had left for the next 2 months. A subtle tremor started in my hands, a vibration that quickly spread through my entire body. I could feel the thin cotton of my nightgown clinging to my skin, suddenly too hot, too constricting. The sunlight streaming through the kitchen window, usually a comfort, now felt harsh, exposing the dust motes dancing in the air, the dull film on the counter, the visible signs of a life I was failing to maintain, not for myself, but for them. I thought of Daniel, my son, the chubby-cheeked boy who used to cling to my leg, the teenager who, with earnest eyes, swore he'd take care of me when he grew up. He was almost 40 now, with a sharp suit, an expensive car I'd helped with the down payment for, and a wife, Chloe, who flaunted a diamond that cost more than my annual pension. They were fine. They were not starving. Yet I was the one making daily choices between fresh produce and another trip to the budget canned goods aisle. The sheer unfairness of it all left a bitter taste in my mouth, sour and metallic, like old blood. I got up slowly, my knees aching with a familiar stiffness, each movement a conscious effort. My reflection in the darkened window showed a woman tired to her very bones. The lines around my eyes seemed deeper, etched by years of worry and unacknowledged effort. A cold knot formed in my chest, tightening with each shallow breath. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about being seen, truly seen, for the sacrifices I made, and receiving nothing but cold expectation in return. I was an ATM, a wallet, a convenience, never a mother, never a person, just a disposable resource. I walked into the small living room, the worn rug soft beneath my bare feet. My gaze landed on the old mahogany chest in the corner, its lid always slightly ajar. Inside lay my true sanctuary, a collection of leather-bound journals. They were filled with the stories I had meticulously gathered in my youth. Tales of our village elders, local legends, folk songs, and ancient proverbs, all written in my looping cursive. Each page was a thread connecting me to a past that felt richer, more authentic than my desolate present. These weren't just stories. They were echoes of a life lived by people who understood reciprocity, who valued wisdom, who cherished legacy. I sat on the floor, ignoring the dust bunnies under the armchair, and gently pulled out the oldest, most worn journal. The leather felt soft, familiar under my fingertips, a tangible link to something real. I opened it to a random page, the faint, comforting scent of aged paper and dried lavender filling my senses. My eyes skimmed over the familiar script, the words like a soothing balm to my raw nerves, whispering truths from a bygone era. This was a world where loyalty meant something, where wisdom was passed down, not ignored, where family truly cherished each other. I closed my eyes, letting the stories wash over me. A quiet rebellion against the crushing weight of ingratitude that had defined my life for far too long. I was Evelyn Munro, a woman who had given everything and been left with nothing but the echo of her own generosity. But in these journals, in these forgotten words, I felt a flicker of something new, something that was entirely, profoundly mine, something they didn't know about, something they couldn't take. And as the distant hum of traffic outside my window seemed to mock my solitude, I began to wonder, how much of ourselves do we lose when we let others define our worth? And what truly happens when we finally decide to reclaim it? The faint scent of aged paper and dried lavender was my only comfort. It clung to the worn, leather-bound journals, my sanctuary, my refuge from the cold silence of their ingratitude. I pulled one closer, the oldest one, its spine cracked, pages soft and thin from decades of turning. My fingers traced the careful script, my own youthful handwriting capturing the voices of the past. These weren't just dusty notebooks. They were fragments of forgotten wisdom, echoes of lives lived authentically in our quiet village. I remembered sitting at the feet of old Agnes, her voice like rustling leaves, telling tales by the flickering firelight, or patiently drawing out riddles from Thomas, the blacksmith, his hands gnarled, but his mind sharp as flint. Each story, each proverb, each local legend was a piece of oral history, meticulously recorded, every nuance preserved. It was a secret world, a deep well of knowledge no one else in my family, certainly not Daniel or Chloe, had ever cared to dip into. My hobby, as they called it, was in truth a lifetime's dedication, a quiet mastery of a forgotten craft. My eyes followed a particularly intricate folk song, a lament about a river spirit who reclaimed what was hers. The lyrics flowed, and for the first time in years, I felt not exhaustion, but a familiar stirring of purpose, a quiet hum beneath my skin. This was my knowledge, my connection to something real and profound. It wasn't money, or social status, or the endless pursuit of appearances. It was the enduring power of story, and I held it in my hands. A soft chime from my phone startled me, pulling me from the faded pages. It was a message from Beatrice, B, my oldest friend. Thinking of you, Ev. Call me if you need a listening ear, or just a distraction from the world. B always knew. She always saw past the quiet facade, into the heart of things. I called her back, my voice initially hesitant, then finding its rhythm. B, I began. I've been thinking about the journals. Remember how you always said I should do something with them? Of course I remember, Evelyn. Those stories are treasures, authentic, real, not like those mass-produced, shiny things everyone else chases after. B's voice, warm and solid, filled my ear. You have a gift, Ev, a rare one. All those old tales, those proverbs, they're part of you. You are those stories. Her words, so simple yet so profound, resonated deep within me. She was right. I was tired of being a background character in other people's stories. It was time to remember my own. I was thinking, I said, a faint tremor of excitement mingling with my weariness, of compiling a manuscript, just to get it out there, to share them. "That's wonderful, Ev," Bea exclaimed, her enthusiasm infectious. "It's about damn time. You've poured your soul into those pages. People need to hear them. The world needs a bit of genuine magic right now." I could almost see her nodding on the other end, her signature, no-nonsense encouragement, a soothing balm. It wasn't about fame or fortune or proving anything to Daniel and Chloe. It was about honoring the elders, honoring the stories, and most importantly, honoring the part of myself I had neglected for far too long. This was a quiet act of defiance, a reclaiming of my intellectual property, my unique voice. This was for the stories. This was for me. A small, almost imperceptible shift began deep within my core. It was not a grand plan for revenge, but a subtle assertion of self, a tiny crack forming in the walls I had allowed to be built around me. And as I held the ancient journal, its pages whispering secrets of a time when wisdom truly held weight, I realized this quiet beginning might just be the most important step I would ever take. What kind of world truly values the quiet treasures passed down through generations, and how much is lost when we forget to listen? The package was modest, wrapped in brown paper, bearing only my return address and a prayer. After weeks of carefully editing, meticulously transcribing, and agonizing over every word, I finally walked the manuscript to the post office. The air outside was crisp, a faint chill that hinted at the coming autumn, a stark contrast to the quiet fire that now flickered inside me. Handing over the box, I felt a strange mix of dread and exhilaration. It was a leap, a quiet defiance, a whisper into the vast, indifferent world. Then came the waiting. Each morning, the mail slot's clatter sent a jolt through me. Each afternoon, the empty mailbox was a quiet dismissal. Life continued its routine. I still balanced my meager budget, still watched Daniel and Chloe's vacation photos appear on my social media feed. Tahiti, then a cruise through the Mediterranean. Each one a silent, self-inflicted wound. But now, beneath the familiar ache, a new undercurrent flowed. A thread of quiet anticipation, a secret hope I hadn't dared voice, not even to be. It was a personal gamble, an investment not of money, but of self, into something entirely my own. Weeks blurred into a month. I had almost convinced myself to let the hope die, to accept that my stories were meant only for dusty journals and my solitary comfort. Then, late one afternoon, a new email notification popped up on my tablet screen. The sender, Whispering Pines Publishing. My heart gave a strange, breathless flutter. My fingers hesitated, hovering over the screen. This wasn't a rejection. The subject line glowed with curious urgency. Regarding Village Echoes, Tales from the Old Country. Evelyn Monroe. I clicked, and the words bloomed across the screen, a cascade of genuine enthusiasm. Arthur Sterling, senior editor, spoke of being enchanted, captivated, transported. He called my work a rare gem, praising its authenticity and profound cultural richness. My breath hitched. He wanted to offer a book deal, not a polite refusal, not a suggestion to revise, but an offer, an immediate, unequivocal offer. I reread the email 3 times, the words blurring through a sudden film of tears. The silence in my apartment, once heavy with loneliness, now hummed with disbelief and a nascent thrill. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of phone calls with Arthur, his voice brisk and kind. Contracts arrived, surprisingly fair ones. I found myself discussing cover art, marketing strategies, and publication dates with a professional ease I hadn't known I possessed. Village Echoes, Tales from the Old Country, hit the shelves not with a bang, but with a quiet, persistent hum. It found its way into independent bookstores, into libraries, onto bestseller lists for regional interest and folklore. Critics praised its unassuming charm, its genuine voice, its power to transport readers to a forgotten world. My stories, the whispers of my elders, were finally being heard. Then came the first royalty statement. I opened the envelope with trembling fingers, half expecting a token sum. Enough for a nice dinner, perhaps. But the numbers inside were startling. More followed. They trickled in at first, then poured, a steady stream of undeniable financial validation. My meager pension, once a lifeline for Daniel and Chloe, was now dwarfed by the income from my words, my passion, my years of quiet dedication. This wasn't just income. It was a tangible affirmation of my worth, a profound counterpoint to every silent bill I'd ever paid for them. It was a secret, accumulating power. I held the printout, the paper crisp in my suddenly steady hand. This wasn't simply enough to cover my bills. It was enough to breathe, to dream, to finally step out of the shadows of their expectations. My gaze drifted to the window. The world outside suddenly vast and full of possibility. The cage, I realized, was opening. This newfound freedom, born from the deepest part of my hidden self, was more than just money. It was a promise, a whisper of a life I could finally claim. And as I stared at the numbers, I knew this was only the beginning of a journey they couldn't even begin to imagine. What happens when the quietest voice finds its truest power? And what hidden desires might such power unleash? The numbers on the royalty statement were breathtaking, a silent chorus of vindication. For weeks, I had simply stared at them, letting the sheer weight of their possibilities settle. This wasn't just enough for comfort, it was enough for freedom. Enough to finally chase a long-forgotten dream, a life on the open road. I found her online. A pearl-white, fully equipped travel caravan, compact yet mighty, designed for solo adventurers. Her tiny kitchen gleamed under compact LED lights. The built-in bed looked impossibly cozy, and the thought of waking up to a different vista each morning sent a thrill through me, a feeling I hadn't known in decades. I bought her outright. No loans, no debt, just my name on the title, a tangible symbol of power reclaimed. The act of sending that final email to Daniel felt strangely anticlimactic. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but my heart was steady. "Dear Daniel," I typed, "effective immediately, I am no longer able to assist with your financial obligations. Please manage your own affairs going forward. No explanations, no apologies, just the clean, sharp edge of a boundary finally drawn." I attached a brief note to Chloe, a carbon copy of the message to Daniel. I hit send and felt a lightness I hadn't realized I was missing, like shedding a heavy, threadbare coat. My first weeks on the road were pure, unfiltered liberation. The hum of the caravan engine became my new lullaby. The changing landscapes my daily masterpiece, from the sprawling green fields of the Midwest to the ancient red rock formations of the Southwest. Each mile was a step further from the suffocating expectations I had endured. I parked by placid lakes, beneath towering mountains, and in quiet, sun-drenched forests. I made strong coffee on my little stove, ate simple meals, and watched sunrises paint the sky with colors I never knew existed. The solitude, once a burden, transformed into a profound sense of peace. For the first time, I was truly Evelyn Monroe, unbound, unbeholden. This was my vindication, a quiet triumph playing out across the vast canvas of America. As the days deepened into early winter, a particular ritual brought me quiet joy. Each evening, as dusk settled and the chill began to creep in, I would brew a cup of chamomile tea and pull out one of my worn, leather-bound journals. The soft glow of the caravan's lamp illuminated the familiar pages, my youthful script, now a faded echo. I didn't read them to escape anymore. I read them to reconnect, to remember the young woman who had devoted herself to preserving these precious fragments of our ancestors' lives. It was a reaffirmation of the intellectual richness that had always been my true wealth, a treasure they couldn't possibly understand. One stormy night, somewhere deep in the quiet woods of the Pacific Northwest, Rain lashed against the caravan's windows, the wind howling like a lost spirit. The rhythmic drumming of raindrops against the roof, combined with the gentle sway of my mobile home, created a cocoon of perfect solitude. I pulled the oldest journal onto my lap, a copy of Village Echoes resting beside it. Its freshly printed pages a stark contrast to the faded originals. I traced a particularly obscure tale, one I'd collected from a reclusive elder named Old Man Hemlock. The story itself was a whimsical narrative of a mischievous forest gnome. But as my eyes skimmed the familiar text, a peculiar pattern leaped out at me. A recurring phrase, a seemingly random sequence of numbers interwoven into the narrative, a strange, almost imperceptible illustration tucked into the margin of the original drawing. My breath hitched. It clicked. A cold shiver ran down my spine, not from the chill in the air, but from a dawning, shocking realization. The folk tales were not just stories. They were elaborate riddles, passed down through generations, a hidden code within the narrative itself. They hinted at something far more tangible, something of immense value, a family heirloom deeply entwined with the very fabric of our village's forgotten history. My heart began to pound, a frantic drumbeat against my ribs. This was more than just a book. It was a map. And as the storm raged outside, I knew, with chilling certainty, that this discovery had set a far greater game in motion, a game my ungrateful children would soon unknowingly stumble into. How much of what we seek is hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right eyes to see, and what happens when greed finally catches up to ancient secrets. The caravan hummed around me, a safe cocoon, but the quiet peace was now laced with a chilling realization. The riddle tales, the hidden code within Old Man Hemlock's story, pulsed with a new, urgent meaning. My perception of the world had shifted. Every word, every seemingly innocuous detail from my past suddenly held a potential for either profound truth or insidious deception. The secret of the heirloom was mine, and mine alone. But a cold dread began to creep in. I found myself replaying recent conversations. Daniel's infrequent calls, always laced with thinly veiled curiosity about my sudden financial independence. Chloe's subtle digs, her questions about my newfound freedom, delivered with a saccharine sweetness that made my skin crawl. Had they always been this transparent? Or had my own fog of exhaustion and obligation made me blind? A shiver ran down my spine. The possibility that they might be sniffing around, searching for the source of my sudden wealth, solidified into a disturbing certainty. I needed to test the waters, to see how deep their curiosity ran. One afternoon, while parked near a quiet mountain lake, I called Daniel. My voice was light, casual. "Daniel, I was just reorganizing some old boxes from the apartment, clearing out clutter. Found my grandmother's old wooden chest. Did you ever wonder about the strange symbols carved into its lid?" A pause. Not the usual rushed, distracted sound of his office. He cleared his throat. "Grandma's chest? Not really, Mum." "Why?" His tone was too steady, a fraction too calm. A flicker of unease danced in my stomach. Later that week, a text from Chloe appeared. "Evelyn, heard about your book. Amazing. I was just wondering, is that all from those old journals you used to fuss over? The ones you had tons of notes in?" Daniel mentioned them. The message was innocuous on the surface, but the casual phrasing, the specific mention of tons of notes, the way she'd avoided calling it a journal and instead referenced the raw material. It made my blood run cold. They knew. Not just about the book, but about the source. My meticulous handwritten notes. My mind raced. How could they have gotten a copy? The original journals were with me, locked safely in the caravan. Had they gone through my things after I left? Or perhaps, during the publishing process, a draft had slipped into the wrong hands? Or they'd somehow convinced Arthur to share an early version? The thought of their greedy fingers pawing through my life's work, the sacred echoes of my past, searching for a shortcut to wealth, ignited a furious, quiet rage within me. They weren't just reading my stories. They were dissecting them, trying to strip them for parts. I imagined Daniel and Chloe, hunched over pages of my detailed script, their faces grim, frustration mounting as they struggled to untangle the deliberate obscurity of Old Man Hemlock's riddles. They would see only jumbled words, not the intricate dance of dialect and double meaning. The subtle cues only a true understanding of our village's forgotten tongue could unravel. They were so far behind, floundering in a sea of literal translation, while I held the compass. The realization brought a grim satisfaction. They believed they were hunting a treasure, but they were already caught in a trap of their own making. I shifted my strategy. No more subtle tests. Now I would simply observe. Let them believe they were ahead. Let them scramble. I was Evelyn Monroe, keeper of the true echoes, and I would be one step, perhaps 10, ahead. The game had begun, a silent battle of wits and legacy, and they had no idea who they were really playing against. What dark paths do desperation and entitlement lead us down? And how long can a carefully crafted deception truly remain hidden? My advantage was the one thing they could never steal: knowledge. With the true nature of the riddles laid bare, the familiar tales in my journals transformed into a complex, multi-layered map. Daniel and Chloe, I knew, would be poring over the published book, perhaps even a stolen draft of my raw notes, trying to decipher them with eager, greedy eyes. But they lacked the key. They didn't understand the cadence of Old Man Hemlock's specific dialect, the subtle shifts in village lore, the double meanings woven into the very fabric of our ancestors' speech. My lifetime's quiet dedication, my hobby, was now my ultimate weapon. I recalled evenings spent by firelight, listening to old Agnes weave spells with words, or sitting on a rickety porch with Thomas, the blacksmith, as he explained the hidden symbolism in a carved wooden bird, their voices, their gestures, the very way they breathed life into these ancient stories. That was the context, the secret grammar of the riddles. Daniel and Chloe, blinded by their desire for quick wealth, would only see literal translations, missing the intricate dance of metaphor and history. They were fumbling with blunt instruments where a surgeon's touch was required. From the quiet comfort of my caravan, parked miles away yet somehow closer to the pulse of our old village than they would ever be, I began my strategic observation. My tablet, usually a window to their flaunted vacations, became a surveillance tool. I saw Chloe's social media posts hinting at research trips to obscure local archives, or Daniel's vague mentions of exploring regional history. It was clumsy, almost comical, their attempts to mimic true intellectual pursuit. They'd visit old landmarks, search dusty town records, perhaps even attempt to interview distant relatives, all based on a flat, literal interpretation of my complex living narratives. I watched them move, like pieces on an unseen chessboard. I imagined their frustration, their arguments, as the riddles continued to elude them, each false lead feeding their desperation. They believed the treasure was a simple prize, waiting to be unearthed by the quickest shovel. They couldn't conceive of a legacy, not truly. This heirloom wasn't just about gold or jewels. It was a profound connection to generations of my family, a symbolic thread woven through the very fabric of our heritage. It represented the quiet resilience, the wisdom, the soul of our lineage, a counterpoint to their shallow, materialistic world. The game was on, a silent battle of wits, and I held all the true cards. I could almost hear the rustle of their stolen papers, their frantic whispers, as they tried to force a meaning where deeper understanding was required. Each misguided step they took only affirmed my advantage, sharpening my resolve. My quiet patience, once a perceived weakness, had become an impenetrable shield, allowing me to stay always, undeniably one step ahead. And as I closed the worn journal, its secrets safe, I knew the pursuit for true legacy was far more intricate than they could ever comprehend. What truly holds greater value in this world? The glitter of gold, or the profound, enduring wisdom of those who came before us? The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and ancient secrets. I stood at the edge of the clearing, hidden by the gnarled branches of an old oak, its roots twisting like forgotten spells into the very ground. Before me, nestled deep within a seldom-visited corner of our old village, was the place Old Man Hemlock's last riddle had truly pointed. A collapsed stone well, long abandoned, overgrown with ivy. It was here, at this quiet, unassuming spot, that the final clue would reveal itself. I knew this because I held the true key, not in deciphered words, but in the echoes of a language only my heart understood. Then I saw them. Daniel and Chloe, their figures silhouetted against the fading light, looked desperate. Their clothes were smudged with dirt, hair disheveled. Chloe clutched a crumpled map, muttering angrily, while Daniel frantically kicked at loose stones near the well's mouth. They were frustrated, defeated by the subtle layers of the riddles, grasping at literal interpretations, oblivious to the deeper cultural truths. Their greed had led them here, but their understanding remained shallow. "It has to be here, Daniel." The book said water and depth and lost truth. Chloe's voice, usually so composed, was shrill, edged with panic. "We've wasted weeks. This safari trip cost a fortune, and we're still chasing ghosts." Daniel grunted, heaving a larger rock. The publisher confirmed the book was based on Mum's personal notes. "There has to be something. This place, it just feels hidden." He bent, straining, his face contorted with effort. They were so close to discovering the absence of their imagined treasure. I stepped out from behind the oak, my footsteps barely a rustle on the fallen leaves. The subtle shift in air, perhaps a trick of the light, caught Daniel's eye first. He froze, his head snapping up. Chloe turned slowly, her map falling from her grasp like a dropped pretense. "Evelyn?" Daniel's voice was a ragged whisper, a mixture of shock and dawning dread. "Daniel?" "Chloe," I said, my voice calm, cutting through the growing silence. There was no anger, only a quiet, resolute power. "Looking for something?" Chloe straightened, her eyes narrowing. "What are you doing here?" "Spying on us." The accusation was laced with a desperate defensiveness. "No," I replied, my gaze unwavering. "Simply retrieving what's mine. Or rather, what always belonged to our ancestors." I walked deliberately towards the well, past their frozen figures. You see, Old Man Hemlock's stories weren't about hidden gold for the taking. They were warnings, about greed, about misunderstanding true wealth. I reached the well, not bending down like Daniel had, but reaching into a small, almost invisible crevice in the ivy-covered stone, a place I'd known since childhood. My fingers found the familiar coolness of carved wood. Slowly, carefully, I pulled out a small, intricately carved wooden box, its surface worn smooth by centuries of careful handling. It was unassuming, but its presence filled the clearing with a profound energy. This was the heirloom, not of monetary value, but of irreplaceable historical and cultural significance to our village. Daniel's jaw dropped. Chloe gasped, her eyes wide, flickering from the box to my face, then back again. "What is that? What have you done?" she stammered, her voice barely a thread. "What I've always done, Chloe," I stated, holding the box gently. "Protected our legacy. You saw these stories as a blueprint for quick profit. You didn't understand the true meaning of the riddles, the real language of our past. You couldn't. You saw only what you could take." Daniel finally found his voice. "This is a trick. Where's the money? The fortune you've been hiding?" His face contorted with a mixture of confusion and rage. "The fortune, Daniel, was the value of these stories, their cultural richness, shared through my book," I explained, my voice steady. "And the only treasure here is this, a piece of our history, passed down to be cherished, not exploited." I paused, letting the truth hang in the air, heavy and undeniable. You, on the other hand, have unearthed nothing but your own greed. Chloe took a shaky step back, her eyes fixed on the simple wooden box, her face drained of color, then flushed crimson with humiliation as she realized the depth of their failure, the emptiness of their pursuit. They had spent untold sums on their vain hunt, only to be exposed, empty-handed, by the very woman they had dismissed. Their plans, their carefully crafted illusions of wealth, shattered in the quiet clearing. The justice, I realized, was already cascading around them, not with a roar, but with a quiet, devastating truth. And as the forest began to darken, I knew they were finally beginning to feel the profound cost of their endless entitlement. What truly remains when all illusions are stripped away? And how does the world judge those who value only what they can possess? The silence that fell was heavier than any spoken word, thick with their unraveling. Daniel and Chloe stood frozen, their faces a canvas of disbelief, then dawning horror. The simple wooden box, nestled in my hands, seemed to glow with a quiet power that mocked their frantic, dirt-smudged efforts. The clearing, once a place of secret solace, now held the sharp, cutting edge of their exposed greed. Chloe was the first to break the stillness, a choked gasp escaping her lips. Her eyes, wide and wild, darted from the unassuming box to Daniel, then back to me, as if trying to piece together a reality she couldn't comprehend. What is that?" she stammered, her voice thin, stripped of its usual saccharine charm. Her carefully styled hair, now matted with sweat and pine needles, framed a face utterly devoid of its usual composure. The polished veneer of her sophisticated facade cracked, revealing a desperate, ugly desperation beneath. Daniel, usually so quick to bluster, remained rooted to the spot, his mouth agape. His shoulders, which had been hunched with the effort of digging, now seemed to sag under an invisible weight. The initial rage I'd seen earlier, the frustration of their fruitless hunt, had drained away, replaced by a ghastly pallor. He stared at the box, then at me, then at the empty hole they'd frantically dug by the well. The truth, in all its stark simplicity, was finally registering, a bitter pill he struggled to swallow. I held the box out slightly, not as an offering, but as a demonstration. Its ancient wood felt smooth and warm beneath my fingertips, a tangible link to generations past. "This, Chloe," I stated, my voice calm, steady, and resonant in the hushed clearing, "is the heirloom, the true treasure." I met her gaze, unflinching. It has been here, carefully hidden, patiently waiting, for centuries, passed down not by written maps for easy taking, but by stories, by riddles that require understanding, not just translation. Understanding of who we are, where we came from, and what truly holds value. Daniel finally moved, a clumsy, stumbling step forward. "This is a joke, Mom. A wooden box. After all this? All the time we spent. The money. This can't be it." His voice rose, tinged with a dangerous whine of entitlement. "Where's the gold? The jewels? The fortune you've been hiding from us?" His fists clenched at his sides, his face contorting again, not with rage, but with a petulant, almost childlike fury at being denied something he felt he was owed. He saw only the absence of what he wanted, never the presence of what truly mattered. "There is no gold, Daniel," I replied, my voice unwavering, each word landing like a stone in the still air. "No jewels. The fortune, as I told you, was in the sharing of these stories, their profound cultural richness, through my book. The book that allowed me to finally claim my own freedom. The book you so carelessly skimmed, looking for a shortcut." My gaze hardened, sweeping over both of them. "You never sought understanding. You only ever sought personal gain. That's why you couldn't see what was right in front of you." Chloe's eyes flickered nervously to Daniel. But the money?" she whispered, the raw fear of financial ruin etched onto her features. "Your book made so much. Where is it? You can't just keep it all when we're struggling." Her entitlement, ingrained and unyielding, bubbled to the surface even in their moment of utter defeat. It was the same underlying assumption that had allowed them to siphon off my pension for years, the belief that my resources were merely an extension of theirs, to be taken at will. My money, Chloe, is my money, I corrected, my voice sharp, a clear boundary finally drawn. Earned through my own efforts, my own knowledge, my own passion. Something you both know very little about. I felt the old patterns of guilt and obligation, which had held me captive for so long, finally break apart, scattering like dust in the wind. As for struggling, that is a consequence of your own choices, your own lavish spending, your own complete disregard for personal responsibility. Not mine to fix, not anymore. Daniel's face flushed crimson. How can you say that, Mom? After everything? After everything we've done for you? The sheer audacity of his words, a twisted distortion of reality, almost made me laugh. He truly believed he was the victim, that his actions, his endless taking, were somehow a selfless act. Everything you've done for me? I echoed, a bitter truth in my tone. You mean the silence that greeted every financial bailout? The casual assumption that my meager pension was an endless fund for your exotic vacations? The way you treated my life's work, these sacred stories, as mere material for a treasure hunt? My voice rose slightly, not in anger, but in the quiet force of undeniable truth. You saw me as a resource, an ATM, a convenient ghost in the background of your gilded lives. Not as a mother, not as a person, and certainly not as the keeper of a legacy you were too blind to value. Chloe suddenly dropped to her knees, not in supplication, but in a dramatic, pathetic display. Please, Evelyn, she pleaded, her voice cracking, tears finally welling in her eyes. We're desperate. The debts are piling up. We could lose everything. The house, the cars. Daniel's job is even on the line. This heirloom, it must be worth something. We can sell it. We can repay you. Just give us a chance. Her performance was a desperate ploy, an attempt to leverage emotion where none was left. She saw the box as a commodity, not a connection. I looked down at her, the sudden tears in her eyes not moving me as they once would have. The years of silent sacrifices, of their profound ingratitude, had built an impenetrable wall around my heart where they were concerned. This heirloom is not for sale, Chloe, I stated, my voice cold, devoid of sympathy. It is a piece of our village's soul, a testament to resilience and wisdom. It belongs to the community, to be cherished and understood, not liquidated for a quick profit to cover your reckless lifestyle. I turned, my back to their stunned, humiliated forms. I will be taking this directly to the Village Historical Society, I announced, my voice carrying clearly through the darkening woods. It will be preserved, honored, and shared for those who truly appreciate its worth. I began to walk away, each step firm and resolute, away from the shadows of their entitlement, towards a future that was truly mine. Daniel finally roared, a guttural sound of impotent rage. You can't do this, Mom. You just can't. We're your family. I paused at the edge of the clearing, turning my head just enough so they could see my profile. Family, I repeated slowly, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. Family is built on respect, on reciprocity, on love, not on endless taking and an assumed right to another's life. You broke those bonds, Daniel, piece by piece, with every silent expectation, every unacknowledged sacrifice. You left me with nothing but the echo of my own generosity. I turned fully, my gaze sweeping over them one last time, a farewell to the illusions I had once held. Now, I am reclaiming my echo and my life. I walked away, the soft crunch of leaves under my boots the only sound, leaving them isolated in the darkening clearing, surrounded by the holes they had dug in vain. They were left with nothing but the dust of their failed pursuit and the heavy weight of their own exposed greed. The justice wasn't a grand, cinematic confrontation, but a quiet, devastating truth that stripped them bare, leaving them exposed and empty. It wasn't about revenge, but about balance, about the universe correcting a profound imbalance. My decades of sacrifice had not been wasted. They had been the fertile ground from which my own strength had finally bloomed. Back in the warmth of my caravan, the simple wooden box sat on my small table, bathed in the soft glow of the lamp. It wasn't money, but it was invaluable. I would present it to the village historical society, ensuring its legacy for generations to come. A true testament to the quiet strength and enduring wisdom of our ancestors. A direct counterpoint to the fleeting, materialistic values that had nearly consumed me. My journey continued. The open road stretched before me, no longer an escape, but a path of joyful discovery. Each sunrise brought a new vista, each mile a deepening sense of self. I was Evelyn Monroe, a woman who had been an ATM, a forgotten resource, a silent sacrifice. But now, I was an author, an adventurer, a guardian of ancestral wisdom. I was free. Free to choose, free to breathe, free to truly live. And in that freedom, I found a peace deeper and more profound than any gold could ever buy. The quiet revolution within me had reached its peaceful conclusion. It wasn't a loud declaration, but a profound, internal shift, a reclamation of self-worth born from the ashes of betrayal. I learned that the true measure of wealth isn't what you acquire, but what you preserve, what you share, and what you finally allow yourself to be. Have you ever found your own power in the face of profound ingratitude, or witnessed someone bravely reclaim their true worth? Your stories and experiences are so important, and I truly value every one of your voices. Please share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to join our community on this journey of discovery and